The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. What does this mean? Well, in principle, it means they both risk being arrested if they travel to any of the 124 countries that are members of the ICC. A democratically elected leader of a country, as well as America's strongest ally in the Middle East, could feasibly be arrested. I'm going to give my thoughts in a moment, but I'll just say this straight out of the gate. I think this is an absolute joke. It will have negative ramifications for everyone going forward. Why would any country even follow the Geneva Conventions if it completely hampers their ability to wage war when necessary? More on that in just a moment. The arrest warrants have caused a wide range of reactions from the international community. When asked, here's Justin Trudeau.
Now that the ICC has issued warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Canadian law enforcement is obligated to arrest them should they come to Canada. Will you allow that to happen, or will you step in to prevent an arrest?
First of all, as Canada has always said, it's really important that everyone abide by international law. This is something we've been calling on from the beginning of the conflict. We are one of the founding members of the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. We stand up for international law, and we will abide by all the regulations and rulings of the international courts. This is just who we are as Canadians.
His response, in my opinion, was disappointing. He seemed to avoid directly owning his position, which leaves people wondering what he truly believes. Essentially, his answer boils down to, yes, we will arrest the democratically elected leader of the only Jewish state who just suffered a terrorist attack if he lands in Canada. I mean, if that's what you mean, just say it. It's this lukewarm, go with what's popular vibe that turns people off when it comes to Trudeau. Whether you agree with this move or not, owning your position, in my opinion, with conviction, is what makes a leader stand out. Now, let's not forget the bigger issue here. This move by the ICC is clearly a politically motivated action against the state of Israel. The US has also expressed significant opposition to the ICC's decision. President Joe Biden called the move outrageous, and US officials have strongly rejected the arrest warrants, citing a lack of jurisdiction and bias in the court's actions. The US doesn't recognize the ICC's jurisdiction over its nationals or those of non-signatory states like Israel for cases like this. More colorful members of the US government like Lindsey Graham had some choice words to say.
So to any ally, Canada, Britain, Germany, France, if you try to help the ICC, we're going to sanction you.
Well, that means I want every ally, and you saw little Justin in Canada and his position. What should the penalty be?
We should crush your economy because we're next. Why can't...
Here's how Netanyahu himself reacted to the news.
The anti-Semitic decision of the International Court in The Hague is a modern Dreyfus trial, and it will end the same way. 130 years ago, the French Jewish officer Alfred Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason by a biased French court. In response to these false accusations, the great French writer Émile Zola wrote his monumental essay, J'accuse. He accused the French court of anti-Semitic lies against an innocent officer who was later exonerated of all guilt. Now an international court in The Hague, also headed by a French judge, is repeating this outrageous offense. It is falsely accusing me, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and Israel's former Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, of deliberately targeting civilians. This when we do everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties. We issue millions of text messages, phone calls, leaflets to the citizens of Gaza to get them out of harm's way, while the Hamas terrorists do everything in their power to keep them in harm's way, including shooting them, using them as human shields. The court in The Hague accuses us of a deliberate policy of starvation. This when we've supplied Gaza with 700,000 tons of food to feed the people of Gaza. That's 3,200 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. And these supplies are routinely looted by Hamas terrorists who deprive their people of much-needed food. Yet just in the last few weeks, Israel facilitated the vaccination of 97% of the people of Gaza against polio. This doesn't prevent the court of accusing us of genocide. What in God's name are they talking about in The Hague? The truth is simple. No war is more just than the war that Israel has been waging in Gaza after Hamas attacked us unprovoked, launching the worst massacre against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. The decision to issue an arrest warrant against me, the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and our former defense minister, was made by a rogue prosecutor who's trying to extricate himself from sexual harassment charges, and by biased judges who are motivated by anti-Semitic sentiments against the one and only Jewish state.
In my opinion, this will go down in history as a time when the world's moral compass was corrupted, a time when dictators and terrorists were appeased and even defended, while the only democratic country in the Middle East was demonized. Millions die across the planet at the hands of brutal regimes. Children are forced into marriages, women are silenced, and civilians are tortured and hung. And we haven't heard a peep from the ICC. Yet, a country that faced a genocidal attack by a death cult is singled out as the problem, despite going out of its way to minimize civilian casualties, vaccinating civilians of an opposing force, and providing thousands of tons of food. It's still the target of outrage. Meanwhile, its enemies hide in tunnels, fight from residential areas, and fight without uniforms, all in an attempt to maximize civilian casualties. Why? Because they know the West will rise up against Israel. For Hamas, dead civilians are propaganda gold. Let's not forget, they're still holding hostages that they refuse to release, even after being offered millions of dollars. Israel is fighting an enemy that doesn't even try to abide by international law, an enemy that has vowed to repeat October 7th over and over again. Any civilian death is a tragedy. I'll say it again. Any civilian death is a tragedy. The combatant to civilian death ratio in Gaza is one of the best ever recorded in urban warfare. This is where things get tricky when it comes to the Geneva Conventions. They're supposed to strike a delicate balance between humanitarian goals and military necessity. My fear is that these arrest warrants have completely delegitimized the ICC as an authority. The Geneva Conventions aim to minimize suffering and protect those who aren't participating in hostilities, like civilians, wounded soldiers, and prisoners of war. They're grounded in humanity, recognizing the dignity of every individual, even in war. But on the flip side of the coin, they also recognize that war is a grim reality. The rules aren't meant to prevent war entirely, but to regulate it. They allow countries to defend themselves and conduct military operations within the bounds of proportionality and humanity. In other words, you can make rules for war, but those rules can't make it impossible to wage war. Otherwise, why would any country follow them? Another issue is that fighting non-state actors or terrorists complicates everything. Is the message being sent here that terrorist groups can come in, slaughter your people, take hostages, and hide among civilians without fear of consequence? This move could embolden bad actors, convincing them that this is a viable strategy. And it seems like most of the outrage is directed at the one party in this conflict that's actually trying to follow international law. The terrorists themselves are seemingly given a pass because they're resisting. Anyway, if you came this far, it means that you enjoyed this. And if you enjoyed this, I would appreciate a like. And I'm trying to grow this channel, so subscribe as well. And I'll see you next time. Ciao.